we've had a few recognitions. If you're here for other matters, they tell me there's some empty seats over there. And again, if you to lead us in the invocation tonight, we'll have a brief moment of silence that I will lead. All right, so we will call to order this duly advertised regular meeting of the Okaloosa County District School Board. And the first item of business is to approve the agenda. And so I am now asking for a motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. All in favor? All right. Let me point out that there were a couple of changes to the agenda. We have moved to discussion item 8.2. That occurred at our workshop, and that will be the parking lot discussion, the exclusive parking lot discussion regarding the renewal of an agreement at the school board and Beachside Ministries. Are there any other items from consent before we get there that folks might like to move?
Chairman, I'd like to move 7.21.
All right, board members, item 7.21 concerning employee suspensions will be moved to discussion on your agenda. And so what that means, folks, is that when the consent agenda gets considered, that item has been pulled and moved separate and will come later in the agenda for discussion. All right, so moving forward, we now go to section 3, recognitions, Celebrate Freedom Week, presented, I believe, by Mr. Paul Whidden tonight, and 8th grade students at Ruckle Middle School. Superintendent Jackson, would you like to
Mr. Whidden, would you come forward and your students?
Yep, my students come forward.
And the floor is yours, sir.
Well, I'd like to say good evening to all of you. I want to start out by saying, here, come on, girls, y'all can just line up right here where they can look at. I want to say thank you to Ms. Jackson and thank you to the school board for allowing Ruckle to demonstrate what we do during Celebrate Freedom Week. We put a lot of effort. This is an effort by the entire student body. And these are students that are from Mrs. Lamberson's U.S. History class, and she selected these 3 ladies to come and lead y'all in the recitation of an excerpt from the Declaration of Independence. And we'll go into that. So at this point, I'm going to ask the 3 ladies, you can turn and face the audience, girls, and just introduce yourselves. And then when they introduce themselves, Jillian is going to give you kind of what Celebrating Freedom stands for and Celebrate Freedom Week. And then Addie will give you directions on what we're going to do, and then Sasha will help them lead y'all through the recitation of the, everybody should have a piece of paper where you can go. And these girls, I've heard them say it, they've got it all down. Most of our students do for the entire week. So Jillian?
Hi, I'm Jillian Sewell, and I'm an 8th grade student at Ruckle Middle School.
Hi, I'm Sasha Medias. I'm also an 8th grade student at Ruckle.
Hi, I'm Addie Riley. I'm also an 8th grade student at Ruckle Middle School.
Go ahead, Jillian.
After 9/11, all Florida legislatures declared that the last week in September each year would be celebrated in all Florida schools as Celebrate Freedom Week. The idea behind this law is to ensure that our school children gain knowledge of and appreciation for the history of the freedoms and liberties that we enjoy in the United States today. This Florida law mandates some specifics, one of which is that all school children will recite a designated portion of the Declaration of Independence each day of this week. At Ruckle, we will be doing this together each day as a part of the morning announcement.
Would you all, using the handout you have been given, recite this required portion of the Declaration with us? We hold these
truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what we do throughout the week, and I'll to stay on track. Ruckle students and faculty annually participate and celebrate Freedom Week. Each day of the week, during the first part of the first period, teachers and students discuss events that led to the proclamation of our independence, the writing and signing of the Declaration of Independence, and the Revolutionary War that was fought so that we could have our independence. On each day, after the short lesson, each class recites the excerpt that y'all just recited with us, and from the Declaration of Independence. And I want to thank all of you for participating. I want to thank these students for coming out and representing Ruckle.
Thank you, Mr. Whidden, and Mr. Whidden was filling in tonight for Mrs. Lamberson, so good job, Mr. Whidden. Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Lamberson regrets that she couldn't be here. We were wonderful students, but we'll share with her.
Great job. You did good. Good job. Thanks, girls. All right, and so, Mrs. Jackson, I think we have another presentation for the Silver Level Florida Healthy School District flag.
Miss Sunday, are you in the room?
Yes, she's right.
And come on up with our guest, please.
Well, good evening. My name is Zachary Gibson. I'm the Chief Child Advocate and Director of the Governor's Office of Adoption and Child Protection. I'm here this evening with my colleague, Ms. Rachel Tarrin. She is the Healthier U.S. School Challenge Specialist with the Department of Agriculture in their Food, Nutrition, and Wellness Division. As proud members of the Florida Coordinated School Health Partnership, it is our pleasure to present this silver level, we're going to unfold it here, to present this silver level Florida Healthy School District flag to Okaloosa County Public School District. Let's give them a hand, please. The Florida Coordinated School Health Partnership is a grassroots organization that advocates for school health issues and recognizes excellence among Florida school districts. Members represent non-for-profits as well as primary sponsors for the award, including Florida Action for Healthy Kids, the Florida Association of District School Superintendents, and the Florida Healthy Kids Corporation. They all applaud your district for establishing a culture and climate in which students and staff can reach their personal potential. As some of you may know, recognition as a Florida Healthy School District is determined by submission of the Florida Healthy School District Self-Assessment. This tool is based on a sustainable infrastructure, policy, programs, and practice identified from national and state guidelines, best practices, and Florida statutes. In 2009 was the first year of this assessment that was able for completion by Florida school districts. We're pleased that Okaloosa County has been at the forefront as a Florida Healthy School District since 2010 as a bronze level district, advancing to silver in 2012, and is now designated for the 2017-2019 cycle as an impressive silver level healthy district. Again, congratulations. Okaloosa County School District joins other districts that are currently designated as a Florida Healthy School District. There are 14 gold, 17 silver, 14 bronze, for a total of 45 schools being recognized. Throughout the coordinated school health approach, your district has embraced strategies to reduce student barriers to learning and has improved conditions for a more conducive work environment. that supports academic achievement. To give everyone a brief background on the assessment criteria, there are 8 areas evaluated. Those include health education, physical education, health services, nutrition services and education, counseling, psychological and social services, healthy school environment, staff wellness, and family and community involvement. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Rachel, who's going to talk more.
Okaloosa County the schools demonstrated a high level of success in several areas. And as Zachary mentioned, that in 2010, that the district received a bronze level, then going up in 2012 to a silver. And but I'm going to explain the improvement areas in the 4 out of the 8 areas that have either kept the district at a silver level or have exceeded to where we might see you at a gold level in 2 more years. But physical education, that out of the 8, again, 4 areas that were very successful. Physical education in 2010, the district received a score of 50%, and in 2017, 74%. So you see the increase in success there. In health services in 2010, the district scored at 71%, and in 2017, an impressive 90%. Family and community involvement. This area deserves applause for maintaining very high scores. In 2010, the district scored 94%, that's pretty high already in 2010. And in 2017, advanced to an outstanding 96%. So you're only 4% from 100, which is pretty impressive in family and community involvement. Healthy school environment. In 2010, the district received an 85%, and in 2017 received a 92%. And if I may, to give you a little bit on just those 4 areas, what they encompass. In physical education, this area is all about planning and sequential instruction that promotes lifelong physical activity. Studies show that students who are physically active perform better academically. Health services, in health services where you receive 90%, health services remove health-related barriers to attendance, performance, and academic performance success as well. Healthy school environment at a 92%. A healthy school environment reflects the physical plant as well as the social climate of the district, including safety, personal interaction, and violence prevention. At 92%, you should applaud yourselves. Family and community involvement, 96%. Family and community involvement is key to garnering support and resources for the community and members and involving parents as partners. So those are the areas that you were very successful in, and we hope to see continued success. And again, I'd like to see a gold level in 2 more years, which I think that will be very, very highly possible. I'm then now going to turn it back over to Zach.
Thank you, Rachel. I think that was representative of the holistic approach that the district needs to take. You know, it's beyond just the academics. It's really about mind, body, and spirit and the work that you do. And I think that's a testament to superintendent, the staff, and certainly for the support of the board. So thank you all very much. Lastly, and probably the most one of the most important areas, district infrastructure. In 2010, your district scored a 60 in this area, now has increased to a 64. This is an area that you want to continue to work to strengthen because having a solid district infrastructure in place is the most influential factor for future sustainability. The Florida Coordinated School Health Partnership looks forward to supporting and promoting your efforts for the future. We want to provide resources, technical assistance, and advocacy, as Rachel mentioned, as you strive for gold. We are greatly honored to be here with you, and we'd like to present also Superintendent Jackson with this beautiful Healthy School Partnership shirt. And members of the board, we asked if you would please join us. We'd love to take a picture with you to recognize you all for being a silver district through the program.
All right, board members.
Thank you.
There you go. Look at that.
Well, hey, you know what?
Does that work? Nice to meet you. Thanks so much for all that you're doing. How do you do? Nice to see you. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate you. Oh, yes. I apologize. We'd also like to recognize some members of the district staff if they're here this evening. Ms. Terry Schroeder and Lisa Sunday. Mr. Brian Humphrey and Andy Johnson. Mr. Steve Anderson. Mr. Steve Bolton. And Mr. Henry Kelly. If you all are here, please join us up front. Can we all sneak in? I'm sliding over here. Thank you all very much. Thank you all very much again.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, folks, I'll recess for about 2 minutes. We'll reconvene at 6:18. If folks that were here for that want to vacate, now's your chance to go to dinner. And then we'll reconvene in just a couple of minutes. And folks, there at least one chair I see up front here and a couple of others that will be open. We've still got one empty chair way up front. Anybody wants that one? All right, I'm going to reconvene this school board meeting, and at this time, Mr. Destin, I would like to pass the gavel to you as I have a couple of motions that I would like to make, and for folks that are interested, you can see relevant comments regarding these motions that were made at the school board workshop last Thursday, September the 21st, and those are available there.
We still have visitors.
Yeah, but I'm doing it now. Yes, ma'am, that's right. So, Mr. Destin, you have the gavel now, and thank you.
Please proceed.
All right, so the first motion that I am making, looking for a second, is a motion pertaining to new school board policy language for consideration on Monday evening, September 25th, of course, tonight, 2017. Motion that the school board attorney draft new school board policy for consideration adoption by the school board to include the intent or verbatim of the language below. When the superintendent receives a confirming district investigative report that a student is the victim of cruelty, abuse, or harassment, or that the student's civil rights have been violated, then the superintendent shall immediately inform the school board chairman, who will confer with the school board attorney regarding the best method of informing other school board members.
I'll second that, Mr. White, and we'll a little discussion if possible.
Mr. Destin, since you're presiding, someone else will need to second.
Well, I won't argue with on that one. Mr. Walker, anybody would like to second?
I'll second it.
All right. Ready for the discussion?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The only question I have is, are you sure you want to be the person who has this hung around his neck to confer with the attorney to make sure that the best way to inform the rest of the board members shall be adhered to? I would think that, and you can answer for me, Mr. McGinnis, do we not have available methods for you to talk to the other school board members?
Yes, sir.
So I'm not sure where that goes.
My understanding of the motion is that the direction to me is to bring back a policy to you that includes the intent of this language, not necessarily that this is the final version.
So you'll give us
And we'll take into consideration the Sunshine Law and all other appropriate laws as that's drafted.
Sounds good.
And my thoughts on that, Mr. Destin, are exactly as you suggested. The first thing is that I do not intend to always be sitting in the chairman's seat. And so the intent there would be whoever the chairman is would be the notification point. And I understood, and I think I tried to share with you folks on Thursday, that I understand the language may need to be modified or changed somewhat to incorporate all the various legal components that are necessary. But in any case, I know we have some other notification type policies, and this would be one more that would be a way for the board to be informed. And as the lawyer said, would want his counsel to make sure that we don't violate any sunshine laws. And in fact, it may be that we choose to do this in an open meeting, or it may be another avenue that he may avail himself of to share the information with board members.
Well, I second your motion, Dr. White, and intend to vote for it. However, I think Ms. Thrush kind of sent some information.
Sure.
And I guess the only concern I have is if you've looked at the policy book, you can't jump over it now. And I mean, personally, I think Ms. Thrush was making, I think that's the point you was trying to make, is we do have
That's right.
policies on the books and everything, but I think, Lamar, where you're trying to get it, if that's the case, I intend to support it. But I'm not so sure that we probably haven't had policies to cover a lot of our problems. It's just maybe all of us have not been real diligent of making sure that we followed the policies and kept up with the policies. But if you, and you know, any other safeguards you have, I'm sure it can't hurt anything, and that's the reason I intend to support you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker, and I'm very sensitive to the information that Mrs. Thrush provided regarding other policies, and certainly that would be something, and I'm not going to call it bill writing, but in drafting the language of this policy that hopefully the lawyer and Mrs. Thrush or anyone else can work with, because what this really is only a motion to ask the attorney to work on this. We're not approving a new policy tonight.
Right.
And as we know, what would happen is that Mr. McInnes would draft language and bring it back before it became policy. Yeah, I understand, Mr. Walker.
Other comments, members?
No, actually, you hit what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You know, the enormity of it all on one person.
And I'm sure Mr. McInnes will give his opinion, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable with filtering through somebody else. And you know, with all due respect.
I get it.
And so he'll give us a recommendation. And like Mr. Walker, I plan to support you on these. But as I said at the last meeting, I think we have some institutional issues that we need to address. And I'll make a motion later in the meeting to try to work toward that.
Very good. Very good.
Just to clarify, I had sent the school board attorney and Ms. Jackson and the school board secretary just links to existing school board policies that may or may not cover some of the items, and certainly like Mr. Walker said, my intent wasn't to say we already had an existing policy. It was just to point out some of the policies that we do have that cover possibly some similar things, and as Dr. White has suggested, it'll be up to the school board attorney to research other legal documents, other school board policies throughout the state. Leon County does have a school board policy for schools and investigations involving students, and other school boards throughout the state organize their school board policy book in a different manner than we do. So that was just my intent, was to share those with the school board attorney, and the school board secretary shared those with board members. I did not directly share those with board members.
Okay, we will call the question then. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That one passes unanimously. Chairman, you have another one.
Yes, sir. I have one more that I presented as advanced language for consideration tonight, and basically it will start out the same way. That the school board attorney drafts new school board policy for consideration adoption by the school board to include the intent or verbatim of the language below. The superintendent shall require immediate notification of the parent guardian of any student who is the subject of a district investigation alleging that the student's civil rights have been violated and/or is a victim of cruelty, abuse, or harassment. So I'm looking for a second.
A second.
Well, we're looking for a motion also.
That's my motion.
Any discussion on that motion?
Just real quick, I know I talked to Mr. McInnes this morning, and on some of the language here, I just want to make sure that there is some guidelines, like when DCF is involved, that I just want to clarify that for the public.
We'll take all of that into consideration when we bring back a proposed policy. Yes, sir.
And that would be my only comment to that. Having two separate motions doesn't necessarily mean that we would have two separate policies. It might mean that they both might be, the language that would be considered could be in one, but just that there's two motions that you would be looking into what's the best way to present that
That's
as a
my
policy.
understanding. These are two subjects that both
Yes,
need
sir.
to be addressed in school board policy.
That's right.
And obviously, the draft will come back to you for review before it's even advertised for public hearing, so you'll have another shot to take a look at that.
Okay, no more discussion, then I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Mr. Chairman, if you're done, I'll pass back.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Destin, and thank you, colleagues. All right, so what we need to do now is talk about the fact that we are looking at visitors. And Mrs. Hager, I believe you're first on the list, so if you would like to come up and address the school board, please. And Mr. McInnes, if you would provide some information regarding the rules and procedure and so forth.
As you're addressing the school board tonight under policy, you'll have 4 minutes for your presentation.
Yes, sir. Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. My name is Angela Hager. I'm a mother, a special needs advocate, and a representative of concerned parents with special needs children. We have many questions and concerns we would like addressed in light of the recent abuse and neglect investigation involving district employees. I would like to start with informing you that DCF and the Sheriff's Office both confirmed that no formal reports or investigations regarding Marlon Stillions were conducted prior to the one initiated by Mr. Perillo in May of 2017. Mr. Farley's investigation revealed there were 19 school employees who witnessed or were aware of suspected abuse and neglect, but failed to call the child abuse hotline. 19 opportunities were missed to intervene and protect these children, which allowed the abuse and neglect to continue on several nonverbal special needs children, which is reprehensible and inexcusable. Farley's investigative report delivered to the school district acknowledged it was, quote, problematic that employees did not make an immediate report of alleged inappropriate interactions procedures between Stillions and the disabled students. All employees are required to report any actual or suspected cases of child abuse, abandonment, or neglect, end quote. It is clearly evident that lack of mandatory reporting for suspected child abuse is a systemic organizational problem within the school district. So I have a question. What is the school board and district going to do to address this organizational and cultural problem of district employees willfully ignoring mandatory reporting of suspected child abuse in accordance with Florida statutes? On June 17, 2016, the report sent from Mr. Farley to the assistant superintendent confirmed allegations of abuse and neglect. Farley stated, quote, "The common perception is that Teacher Stillians is quick to get upset and often uses negative motivation to a population that may respond better to more patience and positive motivation," end quote. Farley's report included multiple recommendations for Stillians that included the following. She received disciplinary actions, not returned to Kenwood, be recertified in nonviolent crisis intervention, and receive training on the code of ethics and principles of professional conduct. It is the community's understanding that none of these recommendations were followed. None. If Kenwood Elementary didn't want Stillians teaching disabled students after the investigative findings, why did the school district think that transferring her to Silver Sands with a population of the most vulnerable children in the county would be appropriate solution? The district misinterpreted both the teachers' unions and contracts incorrectly, thinking a teacher had protection due to a district investigator failing to abide by guidelines in conducting a complaint investigation. How is the school board and the district going to work with the teachers' union to explicitly clarify that under no circumstances is a teacher protected by the union in investigated cases of suspected or confirmed child abuse? Awareness, responsibility, and accountability in the school district are systematically flawed, and that incredibly poor decisions were made from the bottom to the top. A culture of tolerance for inappropriate behavior modification and conflict resolution with disabled students is evident. There's blatant disregard for following mandatory procedures in accordance with Florida law. What initial and refresher training is required for school district employees, regarding identifying and reporting suspected child abuse? And what is the school board and district going to do to address these gaping deficiencies to bring back the community's trust and confidence in the school district? This started with one child, Noah Perillo, who was abused yet couldn't speak out. We are speaking out here tonight for Noah and all of our special needs children who need our protection. In the best interest of our children, I implore you, the school board and the district, to address my questions posed to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hager. That's 4 minutes. Board members, do you have any comments or any questions for Ms. Hager?
Well, I do have
Mr.
one
Bryant?
comment.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so on our agenda here, it's talking about you're going to speak about a student individual education plan, and at our workshop on Thursday, I specifically asked Superintendent Jackson if she had met with y'all previous.
Yes, sir.
And so I just want to know, speaking up, how'd that meeting go in your eyes?
How did the meeting go?
Yes.
We did talk extensively about IEPs. I do appreciate Melody Summers and Ms. Jackson meeting with me for as long as we did. It was a long meeting. I do appreciate it. I still want to continue work. We want to set up a ESE coordination group with parents and connection also too with the Autism Society of the Emerald Coast. There are a lot of positive changes that need to be made. And part of that is going to also be parents working with the school system, right? We need to act as a team. So that meeting did go well with regard to that. However, I did still have questions that remained, which I addressed here tonight.
Yes,
and I understand the position that you're in, but our questions, I know the community feels, still need to be answered. So I know that there's a lot of excellent educators in Okaloosa County. My son has been a student in this county for 17 years. So we need to fix it, and we need to fix it together as a community. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Hager.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, board members? All right, and Mr. Destin has
Just one
something?
comment, Chairman,
Yes, sir.
and I appreciate Ms. Hager's presentation, and some of the questions she asked do need to be answered, and I will make a suggestion later in the meeting that we have a workshop where we can get together and discuss at a public meeting what we can do to address some of these issues.
All right, very good. All right, yes, sir, thank you. All right, board members, item 4.2, Mr. Farley has withdrawn his request for legal services, and so that item is deleted. All right, moving on now to consent agenda. As I indicated earlier, before we consider the consent agenda, we will at this time call forward those folks that have asked to address the school board, and we'll call you forward based on the timestamp of your blue card. So at this time, Ms. Kathy Cooper, are you here? And Ms. Cooper, I think our good attorney will give you some guidelines and so forth regarding time and so forth.
Sure.
Mr. McInnes.
As I said earlier, 4 minutes for your presentation is by the board's rule.
Okay, thank you. I just have a quick question about the blue cards. Usually when us parents come and we'd like to address the board, we have to have a meeting with the superintendent prior. And in my opinion, we should be able to address the board without having to go to the superintendent either in person or a telephone call and discuss with her what we would like to address with the board. It should be separated where we can not have to jump through hoops to speak to you.
Right, and I agree with that, and you can do it that way if you like. Sometimes, though, folks do want to know information, so we just try to make that available if folks wish to avail themselves of that. We have had occasion where folks met with the school district, and at that point, they felt like that their matter was resolved. Their questions were answered, and sometimes they have questions about protocol. But to answer your question, no, that's not required, it's just offered.
Okay, so is this going to be in every school board meeting?
Blue
You're going
cards?
to offer the blue card, because we haven't been
Oh,
offered
no.
them the last
Well, we've
quite a
had-
few meetings.
Yes, ma'am, I understand. We've had blue cards now for a long time. Mr. McInnes, would you like to speak to the blue card? I mean,
Yeah, the blue cards are the way in which the public can speak to the board about any matter that's on the agenda. The items that you write in earlier to talk about that are not agenda items, those are typically the items that someone would go and meet with the superintendent about, just to be sure that you might see if they could resolve the question. But in regard to items on the agenda, in accordance with Florida law, you have a right to speak before the board votes on those matters, and we have always used the blue card for that kind of public presentation.
Okay.
okay.
The general public who comes does not know that, so maybe
I
we could just.
understand. We maybe
Okay.
need to do a better job communicating
Okay,
that.
thank you so
But
much.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper.
Okay.
Well, board members, any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Ms. Cooper. All right, so I'm looking at the next blue card, and this will be for Madison Smith. Madison Smith. All right, come in, welcome.
Hello.
Who's speaking?
We both are, actually.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. McInnes, will you give them some guidance?
Yes, you'll have 4 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you. We are advocating on behalf of Noah Perillo, and we have a close relationship with the family. I am his stepbrother, practically, and she has babysitted for him on countless occasions.
So in the Florida state statute, it says that all employees and agents of the school board, charter schools, or private school have an affirmative duty to report all actual or suspected cases of child abuse, abandonment, or neglect. And later in section 2 says that penalty is opposed to anyone who fails to report it.
19 people, according to Miss Angela, have failed to report. 19 opportunities were missed. 19 people are to have penalties imposed on them if these statutes are followed now. If those statutes were followed in the first place, it would have saved one family a lot of heartbreak and one child a lot of grief.
Many people here, if not all, know the story about Noah, but it's not just a story. This is a child's life that is going to be affected, not just now, but forever.
So our question is, if the policy had been followed in the first place, would there be a need to make amends to it, in your personal opinion?
Well, I mean, I think it's already been suggested here today, and I'll just use Mr. Destin as the example. Clearly, there's some work that we have to do, and I'll support your idea of us having a workshop. There's no question to that effect.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Is that all? Board members, any questions or comments? All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the next I'm looking at is Jake, is it Etchie? Ike, yes.
We thought we had to do two separate.
Okay, so all right, so then we'll put your card aside. And this, I believe the next card is Neveska Eastwald, is that right? Would you come forward, please? Hello.
Yes, my name is Neveska Eastwald, and I have two kids. I'm sorry about my English kind of broken. I have two kids in the program with Mrs. Stillion, not just one, two. And unfortunately, the way she treated my kid affected his life. He had to be put in medication, even though my kid was pretty much dying because he will not eat. And before actually we start with this program, and because of her suggestion, I have to put my kid in medication for all those years. My kid was pretty much disappearing. He was like a skeleton. My kid was not allowed to drink any water, even though he had eczema. My kid did not want to go back to school. My two kids did not want to go back to school. So I really, really, really pray to God that somehow we can fix this. This woman went to my house, gave me advices about how to treat my kids, and I witnessed how my kids were terrified of this lady. My 6 years old today told me exactly what happened with Mr. Perillo's kid. And kids do not lie. So please, please do something about this situation and try to fix it. Thank you so much.
Any comments, questions? All right, thank you. Thank you, ma'am. All right, so I'm looking at Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, do you?
Mr. Chairman, can I defer to Mr. Ellis? I think he's
Sure.
next on the list.
Sure. All right, Mr. Ellis. Okay, fine. Mr. Ellis. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir,
I'm
Mr.
Sean Ellis. I'm the lead pastor at Beachside Community Church. Just wanted to give a word of explanation for the parking
We could have used
renewal
you
agreement.
tonight.
So, I'm sorry?
We could have used you tonight for an invocation.
You didn't ask, so I could have done that. So, we are requesting the update to our parking agreement with the school district, and I think the current agreement expires in about 6 months. There's been a little concern over the time of that. The reason for us applying for that early is at the request of the city of Fort Walton Beach. We're trying to get a permit for some current construction, and the timing of the completion of the construction coincides with the expiration of the existing parking agreement, and so they, as a part of their permitting process, have requested that we get that updated. So we understand that there may be some changes to some policies along the way, but I believe there is a 90-day cancellation clause as a part of this, so we are more than willing to update that parking agreement anytime along the way as that is necessary. So.
Well, and I think you probably are aware that the particular item that you're interested in, we spoke to Mr. Bennett earlier, has been moved to discussion.
Yes, sir.
And so I hope that you'll remain,
okay, so
that if there are any questions or comments when we get to the discussion portion of the agenda, you'll be available for those.
I will be right here.
All right, thank you, Pastor.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, folks, so those are all the blue cards that we have for this evening. And is there any board member comment about any of that material? All right, so then we'll go ahead and move forward then into the consent agenda. Well, actually, let's go ahead and do the committee and staff reports. We did those earlier at the workshop, and our personnel appointments, item 5, they have already been covered. And so moving into consent agenda, I do want to point out that on item 7.18, the payroll procedures have been revised with forgiveness days for the employees during the school closings on September the 8th and September the 11th, and you should have received that change. And so we'll take now a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Okay, as amended. And so the motion is by Mr. Walker and the second by Mrs. Thrush. All in favor? Opposed, 5-0. Consent agenda moves forward. And so then that takes us to the discussion agenda, item 8, section 8 on your printed agenda or your computer agenda. And we know that we've already moved the item 8.2, non-exclusive parking lot license renewal and extension agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County, Florida and Beachside Ministries. And Pastor Ellis, you owe me $10, Mr. Bryant.
And we discussed that at length in the workshop, and I'd like to go ahead and put it in motion for them that I thought we had done settled it all, but I make the motion that we approve it.
Okay, motion by Mr. Walker. We'll need a second for discussion.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Destin. So now I'll open the floor to discussion. Mr. Rush?
Okay. As I had discussed at the workshop, this is a separate agreement and what I would consider a long-term agreement versus using an existing policy and existing MIS forms, which fall under our facility use policies and our facility use agreements. I have some concerns not about the particular entity in the agreement, but just the fact of creating separate long-term agreements with individual entities outside of an existing facilities use agreement and policies. In our current facility use policy, we do not address long-term agreements, and as Mr. McGinnis alluded to at the workshop, that our facilities use policy and contract is not intended to be a long-term service agreement. I will reiterate, like I did on at the workshop, that there is an Exhibit A that accompanies MIS Form 4052. That is a facilities events rate schedule, and the rate listed on that schedule for a parking lot is $250. Versus the agreement that is before us this evening is for $100. The other issue that I have, and maybe Mr. Ellis, since you're here this evening, you can address it, is the intent to use public school property to meet a development code requirement. I called the city of Fort Walton Beach in regards to your permit application today, and I was unsuccessful in finding out what is the requirement for parking. So I'm assuming that in order to renovate a facility, they're wanting to know that you have so many parking spaces per square footage. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
And so I have some concerns about, again, not your particular entity, but using public school district property to meet the requirements of a municipality's development code. So it could be nonprofit or for-profit entities. Let's just say, I don't want to pick on Mr. Destin, but he has a for-profit entity. And if one of his facilities was located next to a public school property, and he wanted to renovate part of his building, and part of that development code required by the county or a city required that he have so many parking spaces, I don't think it's correct for the school district to use our facilities to meet the development code requirements of somebody else's property, which is a sense what I feel like we're doing with this agreement. Your property requires you to meet certain code requirements, and you're wanting to use school district property to meet your property's code district requirements.
Yes, ma'am.
code enforcement requirements. And that's a concern I have.
Right.
Being that we're in the middle of the agreement, as you stated, it doesn't expire until June of 2018. I know that doesn't meet your time schedule because my understanding is the city of Fort Walton Beach is in receipt of your application.
Yes, ma'am.
But we are also in the midst of reviewing and hopefully updating our facilities use agreements. But if we go ahead and this evening, approve a 5-year term at a rate that's significantly lower than what's on our current facilities use agreement, which I realize we're not using that document to make your agreement. I have some concerns with that, but my biggest concern is using public school property to meet development code requirements for your private property.
Yes, ma'am.
Whether it was a nonprofit entity or a for-profit entity. I don't think that's the intent of municipalities' development code for individual property owners to use other people's property, even if it's taxpayer property, to meet their code requirements.
Yes, ma'am. The city of Fort Walton Beach, because of the time frame, I think for the majority of our building usage, we meet the code for that. On Sunday mornings, there's a time frame where we would like to not meet, have excessive parking, and we need that as overflow parking.
Okay.
And that's what they've agreed to allow the school board to lease us that property for the overflow parking on Sunday mornings. And the city has been okay with that. They approved that previously and agreed to approve that again. And then as to the second question that you had about the length of the term and the possibility of changes being made to that, my understanding was that there was a 90-day cancellation policy, so at any point that the whole contract could be null and void, the whole agreement, and could start over as a new one under whatever new terms that were put forth. So,
and again, my concern is being consistent, creating a separate agreement outside of an existing agreement and policy that we have that doesn't completely address this particular situation as being a long-term lease. And as you stated, there's an existing agreement that's been for 5 years, and if we do it another 5 years, I'm concerned about this being in perpetuity agreement.
Right.
And
there's
so,
some reciprocity in that as well, in that the school uses our parking for football games and things like that as overflow, and that's been written as part of that agreement previously. That when the school needs to use our adjoining parking, that's part of it as well. So it seems to have been a win-win situation for everybody up until this point, and we would love to continue that if we can to make it a win for everybody. So.
and again, I previously voted for the initial agreement that is up for renewal this June. My concern is that since we're currently reviewing a policy that covers facility use, I would like to not approve the agreement for the terms that are listed for 5 years. I would be agreeable to extending it beyond your June 18th requirement or June 2018 requirement, so that you can meet your deadline. But again, long-term, I have a concern of using taxpayer public school property to meet the development code needs of private property.
Okay. I understand your concerns.
All right, anything else?
Mr. Walker?
Board members? Yes, sir, Mr. Walker.
If we discussed at the workshop the other day, the fact that we have a backup clause, and as the gentleman said, if we want to shorten the length of contract where they have to come every year, that would be acceptable. But I hope that we would approve by motion, because, ladies and gentlemen, if we get into what Ms. Thrush is pointing out, do you know that we have property that actually individual businesses actually use all the time and have for years? It's nothing to do with a church or anything. They actually are in businesses. And I hate to say this, but to use a parking lot, and Lord, I need to go 2 times on Sunday, but for us to have a problem with using a parking lot on Sunday. When I drive by these schools and I see garage sales going on Sunday, I see big semis parked that's using them, and this has been, you know, 'cause the schools are public property, and the public, you know, on weekends and times that it's absolutely not hurting us so, but especially when a church, and the thing is, if the length of agreement becomes no problem with the fact that the law clearly requires the back-out clause. Well, if for some reason we end up needing to tell the church that, I'm sorry, you can't use these particular parking spaces any longer, then the contract's null and void. We can give them a contract for 25 years, but if we go to the attorney and say, hey, we wish to invoke the back-out clause, the contract is no good. And I'm hoping that you board members will support my motion, because if we start looking throughout this district at where we've allowed people to use our parking lots and our property, I mean, we have property that's absolutely no use to us, that a dentist, for instance, just came and asked, can I borrow 30 feet to use part of a drive? Well, we have that. We have those kind of things, and we don't need to lose sight. You know, ladies and gentlemen, we are here to serve you, the public, and to me, to deny a church an opportunity to use a parking lot to be able to accomplish what they wish to accomplish, with the fact that if it becomes a problem, we have a legal avenue to get out of the contract. I can't understand what the problem is. And I made a motion, it's been seconded, and hey, I've said all I'm gonna say, but I mean, I really am disturbed with the fact that, you know, we're having a big problem with letting somebody use a parking lot when the school is totally closed, and we have churches that go on in our schools, we have everything. And, you know, hey, we're here to help kids and also work and get the support of the parents, and this may be why we're losing support of the parents. But anyway, that's it.
All right, Mr. Walker, thank you, sir. Any other commentary, board members?
One quick comment.
Yes, sir, Mr. Dixon.
Drawing on 22 years worth of municipal experience, I can tell you that most municipalities in the state allow shared parking agreements for development purposes. Most of them say if your shared parking goes away, then we're going to restrict how you can use that. But it's very common. We did it all the time in Destin, so I don't have a real problem with it at all.
Anything else, board members?
I just want to
Yes,
say,
sir. Mr.
just real quick, and I get where Ms. Thrush is coming from, and I want to commend her for doing her research and all. And just want to say thank you for doing that, and, you know, just trying to look ahead so we don't have those problems in the future. It has nothing to do with the church. It just
Right.
protecting the entity of the school.
Understand? Yes, sir.
And being consistent with all entities, as Mr. Walker alluded to, you know, the review of the facilities use agreement is in need of an update, because we do own a lot of property in the county, and we do have a variety of different organizations, nonprofits, for-profit entities wanting to use our facilities, in our facilities, using our facilities, and so to make our policy as objective as possible, and that it serves the interests of our community and the school district.
Yes, ma'am, I totally understand, and we are completely up. We love partnering with the school. We like being next to the school. We get to do a lot of things to support them, and everything from painting and mentoring and cleaning up and doing whatever we can. And so we are in no way trying to take advantage of the school district. We want to give back and support the school. So anything that we can do to be a part of that process, we want to. So at whatever time the agreement needs to be updated and renewed in some different format, we are completely open to that. So.
And I was going to ask that, you know, when that comes up, excuse me, you obviously are okay with that. So.
Absolutely, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Let's vote.
All right, thank you. Thank you, board members. All right, all those in favor of Mr. Walker's motion, please raise your hand. Vote is 3. All those opposed? 3-2. Motion carries. All right, so now we have another item that in tonight's meeting was moved to discussion. That is item 7.21. Let me read 7.21 so we can go ahead and do business on that item. 7.21, employee suspensions, presented by Ms. Stacy Smith, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Mr. Destin, since you asked to move the item to discussion, sir, I'll start with you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I have some of the same questions and reservations expressed by some of our people on our blue cards, especially when it comes to Mr. Farley, the investigator. I've read through everything I could find on it and listened to all the commentary, and it appears Mr. Farley did his job. He made recommendations that the teacher, I think, be removed from the classroom setting and go for more training. The real question is why that didn't happen. And until we can understand why that didn't happen, in addition to the fact that I think DCF did look into the issue, it might have been after it came out in May, but do we have anything from DCF in writing about their conclusions on the incident?
May I interject
Please do.
and to try to assist? Mr. McInnes, would you speak to the legalities of what is being proposed in this item as to why these employees are listed to be suspended without pay?
Well, the school board's policy provides the superintendent authority in the event an employee is arrested and charged with a felony to suspend an employee until the next board meeting with pay. That's the extent of what she can do. And then the state statute vests the authority in the school board itself to then continue suspensions with or without pay, but you're the only entity that can continue that suspension after that time. So that's why they're here.
And along those lines, can you give me some idea of past practice and how we've pursued this matter with employees that have been charged, formally charged by whatever law enforcement agency with a felony? How have we done that in the past?
It has been the board's practice that when an employee is arrested for a felony, then they are placed on suspension until the conclusion of those legal proceedings.
Okay, so if that were to be the case, what would happen if the employee were found innocent?
Then typically they would be reinstated and they would receive back pay for the time frame of the suspension without pay.
So the motion is to suspend the employees without pay, as has been past practice, although that was the document on the consent agenda. So I guess at this juncture, Mr. McInnes, we are able to entertain a different motion. Is that right?
The matter of suspension is before the board, and it's at your discretion as to whether you make that with or without pay. The recommendation is without pay.
Well, the president, if we go all the way back for many, many years, I don't think, to my knowledge, there's never been a case where a felony was involved that we did not, once they're originally or put on administrative leave with pay till it's brought to the school board. But to my knowledge, and I may be corrected, but I do not ever remember a case that they were not suspended without pay at the recommendation that the superintendent and her staff brings to this board. However, the statutes are very clear that if they are found not guilty, that then we must, and we've had cases fairly recently where they were found not guilty, we did pay them all their back pay and also whatever compensation, even we have to pay the attorney fees. That's also, I think, in the statute. Is that not correct? The board, if an individual is charged with a felony, if they're found not guilty, you not only pay them their back pay, but you also, I think, is even required to pay their attorney fees. But I know that we have done this in the past, and I mean, personally, the reason I have to support the recommendation of doing it this way is we all understand that if by chance they are found guilty, and if you looked at some cases, and let's say the lawyer expense would be $100,000. Well, if they're found guilty, even though the law also says, if you go read it, that you are supposed to go collect that money back from them. Well, you know, that's pretty foolish, I think we all understand. So that's the reason I'm saying that I think our practice in the past has always been to do what the superintendent's recommended. If the individuals, and I'm sure hoping it'd turn out that way, that we'd end up then paying them their back pay and also paying their attorney fees. But that's been the previous practice, even though this board can do otherwise. But if we look, I don't remember ever a single case that we've not handled it that way.
All right, then, so Mr. McInnes, I think I'm looking for a motion of one kind or another. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we proceed with suspending without pay.
Motion by Mr. Bryant for suspension without pay.
I'll second it.
Second by Mrs. Thrush. Any further discussion?
Just a bit,
Yes, sir.
Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I still didn't get an answer. Do we have anything from DCF on their take on this issue?
We requested a copy of that final report, and the legal office called to say that due to confidentiality rules that they have, that report was not available to an outside entity.
Well, as I say, it still rubs me the wrong way that out of all the employees that it appeared were involved, Mr. Farley appears the only one that has been charged with not reporting, and he was the one that did the recommendations and made recommendations that we should have adhered to. So that's all I have to say about the issue.
And the thing that, I agree with Dewey, and the thing that, and I know we can't get into it because of the investigation's ongoing, but it's like it's unreal that if you look at how they would charge Mr. Farley after looking at his report and where it shows it was done, how in the world that there's a young couple that spoke to us tonight earlier when they mentioned 19 people that supposedly in the report supposedly could have turned in child abuse but didn't. Well, I mean, to me, the only person I can find that did turn in a report is Mr. Farley. And yet he's one of the main ones that's been charged, but, all of that's, I'm hoping everybody's gonna be found totally innocent, and a lot of this, all the rumors that's going on, that this happened and that, but I'm hoping all that's going to be proved to not be true. But as Mr. Dessens pointed out, I've asked several times that I've been told that DCF did investigate and they found no charges, but I can't find nobody or nothing that gives me something that shows me that took place. And Mr. Destin, that's kind of where you're at.
It is.
Any further discussion, board members? All right, well, I'm going to vote to support the motion, and that's a reluctant vote, as I suspect others may cast as well or may not. But given past practice and given the fact that, I don't know how else to say it except to say that our employee has been arrested and charged with a felony and to be prosecuted by the state's attorney, that's why I find myself having to vote for this motion. So, motion's on the floor with a second. All in favor, please raise your hand. The vote is 4. Those opposed, 4-1. All right. Thank you, board members. All right, let's go ahead and continue. So that covers us on the items on discussion. And let's go ahead now and take a look at program owner's representative business for construction. Mrs. Thrush, do you have anything for tonight?
Nothing further than what I stated at the board workshop.
All right, very good, ma'am. Thank you. All right, information technology seat management contract. Item 10.1, IT seat management outsourcing agreement contract modification, agreement change order 8, presented by Dustin Keith and specialist in seat management. Let me let my computer catch up here.
You need a motion?
I'm looking, yes, sir. We're checking on that. Does it say so? Okay, the computer's a little lagging, a little behind. So I do need a motion for approving this. A motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. All in favor? The vote is 5-0. All right. And so then that takes us to item 11. Mr. Attorney, your business, sir.
2 items, Mr. Chairman. First,
Yes, sir.
I need the board's authority tonight to retain the firm of Allen Norton and Blue to help us deal with current legal matters, and that would be based upon their rate letter of May the 1st of 2016.
You need a motion?
Yes, sir.
Move it.
I'll second that one.
Motion by Mr. Walker, second by Mr. Destin to approve the agreement. All in favor? Vote is 5-0.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I need to ask the board to allow us to schedule an executive session after your workshop on October 5th at 10:30 or as soon thereafter as the board can convene to discuss a matter of pending litigation.
You need a motion?
Yes, sir.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Destin. All in favor? Vote is 5-0.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, sir. Madam Superintendent, your business.
Nothing tonight, sir.
Yes, ma'am. All right, so we'll go now to board members' business. Mr. Walker, I'll start with you, sir.
I've said enough, I'm through.
I understand, long meeting. Mr. Destin.
At this time, Chairman, I'd like to recommend or make a motion that we either agenda on October 5th workshop or have a special workshop to address some of the other ways that we may be able to head off another incident such as this one. And depending on how busy that one is, I'll leave it to you and the superintendent to decide whether it should be added or should be separate.
Okay, all right. And so I guess you're requesting information at that workshop about notification procedures, requirements, and Mr. McInnes, I think you have a meeting set up with the Sheriff's Department and DCF, if I remember correctly?
The superintendent and the staff, and I'll be meeting with them, or meeting with DCF and a Sheriff's Department representative to go over the current protocol that we have for on-campus interviews by DCF and those matters. Late this afternoon, I was informed it might be bumped by a week, so it may not occur before next week, but it will happen by the middle of October.
So,
Chairman, I would also to bring up the topic of what parts of HR may need to be moved to independent contractors to try to make sure that we don't run across this again.
okay.
And it will be open for discussion for everyone to
Yes, sir.
put in their 2 cents.
Okay. So then can we talk about the attorneys meeting? Will you have that meeting before the, as Mr. Destin said, the October 10th meeting, do we think?
Is that the second
regular
workshop?
Yeah, the regular workshop's the 5th.
5th.
And
I think we would have that meeting accomplished by the second workshop of October, whatever that date.
want to place it on that one?
Chairman White, that may be, if the time allows, what's your motions and all that may be able to all tie together at that point in time.
Yeah, that sounds fine to me.
All right, so the last meeting then in October, workshop then?
Yep.
Okay, and to address your concerns and Mr. Walker and my motions, perhaps if they're ready and prepared, that'd be fine. And so, but now you have a second part that you just mentioned, and that would be regarding HR and the human resources and the possible, I think you said contracting of
Functions. I know the superintendent also chimed in the last time I brought that up and said she had been thinking or talking about that also, and I'll be happy to discuss with her those possibilities.
All right, so and so then perhaps we can include that at the same meeting?
Absolutely.
Would that be agreeable?
Yep.
All right, so do we need a motion to that effect, Mr. McInnes?
Can I ask a question, Mr.
Sure,
Destin,
yes,
real
sir.
quick?
Yes, sir.
So with the independent counsel or firm for the HR, are you suggesting just as a guide or as a just?
I would suggest that we look at possibilities that we may need to go forward to address what seem to me be some institutional problems, not just problems of the policies. You know, as Mr. Walker pointed out, we have a book of policies like that.
Yes, sir.
I don't know what happens when the policies aren't followed. So far, I've not seen a whole lot. So there may be some other solutions.
Well, just to follow up on Mr. Bryant, then, just to clarify what your second item is asking, are you, I interpreted the discussion that was at the workshop to discuss the possibility of subcontracting out or contracting out a third party to perform investigations. But what I'm hearing tonight you saying is that is kind of more on the lines of Mr. Bryant's question, that you're wanting to potentially hire a third party to provide guidance on ways that we could improve or change or make modifications to how we're currently performing investigations, reporting, et cetera. And a recommendation could include, outsourcing investigations, but you're talking more broadly than what I interpreted at the workshop.
I'm saying we need to look at all possibilities, and hopefully between all of us, we can come up with some solutions that will fix this problem for the future, including Ms. Jackson's input.
Do we need a motion for that, or can we
I think as to the meeting, the chairman can set that meeting. You've heard the consensus of the board, and then Mr. Destin can consult with the superintendent, and they can agenda whatever they'd like
We
to.
will.
All right, good with that?
Thanks.
Okay, board members? Okay. All right, then, so let's go ahead and we'll move to, anything else, Mr. Destin?
No, that'll do.
All right, move to Mrs. Thrush.
I don't have anything further this evening,
All
thank
right.
you.
Mr. Bryant?
Just two things real quick. I see Ms. Martello is here, and I was actually going to make an announcement about some of the great things that are going on in our district, but I wanted to highlight that the school way up north by the state line, Laurel Hill, which is in my district, talking about the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and how we are now working at Laurel Hill with some of our students there. So that's an exciting opportunity for those children up there to learn about aeronautics. And if you hadn't had a chance, they do have a drone program up there too. So if you're driving around Laurel Hill and you see a drone, that's probably coming from the high school. But I just wanted, and Miss Martello I didn't know she was going to be here tonight, but I just wanted to recognize her. And also, just for the general public, I will be flying out tomorrow to Washington, D.C. with the the Florida School Board Association for their federal legislative conference beginning on Wednesday. And this is the first time that we're actually sending a school board member to Washington, D.C. for this particular conference. So I'm excited about the opportunity to represent Okaloosa County, but I will come back at our next meeting and let the school board members know if it was really worth our time to go up there, and just report back on all the good things. And I also did send to Ms. Crawford today an agenda that's as of, I think, 4 o'clock this afternoon. So,
All right.
Thank you, Dr. White.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Bryan, and we'll look forward to your report of how politics works in Washington. I mean, but in any case, the only thing I have tonight would be just to encourage board members to continue to do all the things I know you're doing, and going out to the schools and making appointments with principals and talking to principals about what we can do to help and assist them, and talking with teachers and parents, and doing the kind of things I know that you already do, and I would say with a special emphasis at this time, so that we can kind of come up with some ideas and thoughts, I think along the lines of what Mr. Destin was suggesting. All right, so that's all I have. How about anything from staff tonight? Okay. How about association business? All right, with that, anything else, Mr. Lawyer?
No, sir.
This meeting is adjourned. Appreciate your support.
Gizmo just fell down.
All right. Okey doke. Yeah, spoiled all your fun. Media.